Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
The Taxpayer Advocacy Panel's 2025 annual report surfaces nearly 200 recommendations on where IRS communications and services continue to break down. Philip Hwang, National Chair of the Taxpayer Advocacy Panel at the IRS, explains what taxpayers are still struggling with and how their feedback helps to shape what changes next. Mr. Hwang, thank you so much for joining me today.
Happy to be here.
The Taxpayer Advocacy Panel just released its 2025 annual report at a moment when the IRS service levels may be improving in some areas, but frustration remains. What taxpayer problems did TAP most want to surface right now?
I think in the climate of, we hear a lot of reduced staffing and services. I think that's one half of the picture. I think the other half is how to expand IRS reach with existing infrastructure, right? So we're really proud of the recommendations we've made on the online account. It's one of 188 recommendations you'll see in the report, but really looking at the digital now and future in serving taxpayers where they are.
We'll come back to those specific recommendations in a minute, but I want to back up a bit and talk about the advocacy panel. For people who may not know it well, walk us through what the panel is, what its focus area is, and how you work.
Got it. Great question. TAP stands for Taxpayer Advocacy Panel. We're actually a federal advisory committee commissioned to help improve the IRS, right? Really representing the voice of taxpayers across the nation to form these recommendations in meaningful ways to represent both the needs of the taxpayers and address them where they are.
And how do you collect the input?
Another great question there. So we have a website, improveirs.org. We have a submission box there. We also do a lot of outreach, boots on the ground to talk to taxpayers and citizens across the nation. The panel is made up to 75 members across all 50 states, even international as well. So those expats. And so whether it's word of mouth, we hear it, I put pen to paper, and that's how an idea or feedback becomes a recommendation.
And do you focus primarily on the feedback from individuals, or are you looking at corporate feedback, the whole gamut of anybody who's paying taxes?
Anybody who's paying taxes, but I must say that the individuals have the loudest voice. They're the ones engaging with our idea submission system, and but we encourage every taxpayer to provide us their feedback. It's important to note that we do identify what ideas and feedback can be systemic issues and systemic recommendations and improvements, not just individual taxpayer issues or, suggestions like, change the tax law.
You mentioned that the 2025 report includes nearly 200 recommendations, and they cover areas like notices and correspondence and online tools. When you step back and you think about that volume of feedback, what did you learn about the actual taxpayer experience?
I think it's a tapestry of experiences, right? I think you have taxpayers in rural environments, taxpayers who still prefer paper correspondences, still submit their tax returns by writing it out themselves. I only know my experience, and that's what I came into TAP with. But after, this is my third year, I realized there are so many entry points to the beginning of the taxpayer journey for the IRS to manage and to manage effectively. And I think they do a great job. They're so dynamic and staffing during the tax season. They're really thinking forward and creating chatbots, even the new online account. Is anything perfect? Does anything address 100% of taxpayers' needs? No, but I think if you take a step back and look at the whole picture, they're doing a great job of servicing millions and millions of taxpayers every year.
What were some of the biggest trends that caught your eye?
Other than, where's my refund during tax season is what we see a lot being submitted. I think people want more frictionless and more variety, surprising to hear, of interaction and lines of help. So what I mean by that is, for example, the Taxpayer Assistance Center, they would like, walk-in days. And we've had that in the past. The IRS has hosted those in the past. So I think people want more of that. Waiting on the line on the phone is a big thing, right? And so, for example, the callback feature that was implemented a few years ago, that arose from TAP, right? And so it's small things, but meaningful changes. More information on the online account, right? And so you see these iterative changes happening across many different platforms to really modernize the taxpayer experience.
Philip Hwang is the national chair of the Taxpayer Advocacy Panel at the Taxpayer Advocate Service in the IRS. Do you feel like the IRS really understands the digital versus hard copy landscape out there? Are they trying to push everyone eventually to digital, or is there always going to be an opportunity for folks who are hard copy submitters?
I think there's definitely guardrails, so to speak, and a clear nudge to adopt a digital first approach. And, I don't mind it as long as those paper options aren't completely eliminated. But like Aaron Collins, the National Taxpayer Advocate, always mentions, paper is the IRS's kryptonite. And I can understand why. Even the volume of notices going out and coming back in, that takes a lot of logistics and, even supply chain demands on just finding the paper, finding the ink, finding the printers. And so the less paper, I think, the better. And I could speak for myself, only for myself, but, sometimes I don't want to talk to a person. Sometimes I want to engage without, having to actually be on the phone. And so I think digital engagement is the way of the future, but it's not to discount the need for more manual in-person help for those that need it.
One of the issues I think that's carried over the last couple of years that's sort of related to this digital divide is electronic refunds. The IRS was going to go to 100% electronic last year. They delayed that until this year, and there's still been some concern around folks who maybe are unbanked or don't have that capability and prefer to receive paper checks. How has TAP engaged in that conversation?
Definitely has been in the forefront, especially in light of all the new executive order to go paperless check. I think this tax season, as we work through the recommendations, TAP would be at the front line to really understanding what pain points have been revealed in the new process, right? So like if you don't put your bank information, you actually get a letter asking the IRS asking you to input or provide that banking information. And this actually delays the paper check, so up to 6 weeks from the date of filing. But even in the letter, right, it doesn't communicate that. But I think perhaps that's intentional, and like we're nudging the taxpayer to create an online account if they can. But there's also ways to respond to that letter to say, hey, I actually have a valid reason for not being able to receive that refund electronically. And so hopefully taxpayers are better prepared next year. But this year was the first year, so I can understand it's going to be a critical year to gather that feedback and provide a meaningful recommendation by next year on that paperless journey.
One of the other challenges the IRS has faced for decades is modernizing its IT system. What input do you, through TAP, have with the IRS as they're thinking about modernizing and balancing the operational efficiency needs that the IRS wants to create with the user interface customer experience from taxpayers?
Yeah, that's a great question, and something I was totally blind to before TAP. As we work with the IRS and we request the presence of subject matter experts to come help us work through some recommendations. Some things we recommend may seem commonplace to us or, be very intuitive. But what I quickly realized was that there's a lot of technical debt at the IRS that they have to work through, and they have many disparate systems, and I'm glad to hear that they're working on unifying those different systems, right? So one of the things we asked was, why isn't every single notice on your online account if you do have an online account? We found out that certain notices are generated by System A, others by System B, and others by System C. So without having a central repository, it's really hard to centralize that data so that it can be conveniently presented to the taxpayer in real time. Right? I worry about my mail being stolen, right? And so these are services that every taxpayer should have access to, or at least be able to opt into. But there are technical barriers that are behind the curtains where a simple request like, I should receive every notice as a digital copy if I wanted to. That seems simple, right? It's one organization, but IRS is probably one of the biggest employers in the nation. And that is oftentimes neglected or underappreciated.
As you look towards the rest of 2026 and your term as the panel chair, what's on your agenda? What do you hope to see the IRS make progress in?
Hopefully all areas, right? I'm aspirational, but I'm also very pragmatic. Internally, I've called every member, reminding them of why we joined the panel. We're all volunteers. We're passionate about tax administration for one reason or another strange reason, and really putting pen to paper. And so we have different project committees, and I think the diversification of these committees help us cover all the different types of ground. So we have the special projects, and we have international taxpayers working on things that are very probably niche, not a lot of taxpayers work on, all the way down to toll-free lines. I think my personal emphasis, I would love to see some great modernization and the options available to engage with toll-free, even if it's a non-phone method, right? And for example, is being able to queue a callback digitally, right? Sometimes I know there's a way, so why would I call to hold on a way to request a callback where I can just say, hey, do you mind calling me tomorrow? Or I would like a call tomorrow, But again, I know it's a simple sounding ask, but there's a lot of layers behind it that I know that the IRS has the unenviable task of trying to prioritize what's most important.
I've been speaking with Philip Hwang. He's the National Chair of the Taxpayer Advocacy Panel at the Taxpayer Advocacy Service at the IRS. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thanks for sharing the important work that the panel is doing.
Thanks for having me. And, this is a great reminder that you don't have to be on the Taxpayer Advocacy Panel to submit your ideas and your recommendations to help improve the IRS.
We'll post this interview and a link to the annual report at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts.